Welcome to Podcast, the Business of Dentistry podcast, brought to you by Practice Plan. Podcast delivers the best business advice, real-life stories, and practical hints and tips to make your practice a more profitable and sustainable business. And now, here's your host.
Hello everyone, my name is Nigel Jones and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this latest edition of our podcast, where we'll be discussing mental health and in particular suicide, given that it's Suicide Awareness Day. And I'm very grateful to be joined by Professor John Gibson. Welcome, Professor.
Well, thank you, Nigel. I will dispense with the title, shall we? And I'll be John from here on in. That would be great. Nice to be with you.
That suits me down to the ground, John. Thank you very much indeed. It's very good of you to spend your time with us. I wonder if you could just introduce yourself and maybe give us a bit of an insight into why you have a particular interest in this topic.
Yeah, thanks so much. And as always, I thank you and Practice Plan and all staff for listening in and for giving me an opportunity to speak about something that is clearly very dear to us. And just to say at the outset that talking about suicide is utterly important, because the literature makes it very clear that talking about suicide never precipitates suicidal action and may actually save a life and pull people back from suicidal thinking. And so events like this are so important. So thank you for it. Yeah. So on the 20th of October 2019, we lost our youngest child, our younger son, Cameron, to suicide. The most shocking day of my life, bar none. Cameron was a young veterinary surgeon, 24 years old, apparently living the dream, doing the job that he'd always wanted to do. Large circle of friends, great colleagues, very supportive practice, and he took his life. And we have no explanation for that whatsoever. It was a deeply shocking moment when two police officers came to our door and asked if I was the father and next of kin of Cameron David Roger Gibson. I said that I was. And they said, well, sir, we have some ghastly news for you. Cameron is dead, and it appears that he has taken his life. There was no apparent background of psychological or psychiatric distress. And Cameron loved the great outdoors. He was a keen outdoor sportsman. He loved climbing Scottish mountains. He loved kayaking. He loved cycling and walking. He loved wild swimming. All kinds of things that you would say were part of the dream life. And so we are now nearly 4 years further on from that, still as bemused as ever, still as confused as ever about the reasons for his death. And I guess all I now know, having been in this strange new world of suicide for the last 4 years, is that suicide is a very complex issue. No one thing precipitates a suicide, possibly with one exception, and that is gambling. And I now know Cameron wasn't involved in gambling, but I know that gambling can be a major precipitant for suicide and the debts that are incurred because of that. So if there's anyone listening at the moment who is involved in gambling and needs help, please get help. There's lots of charity out there, lots of charities, lots of organizations to help with that. So please seek help. So we're left with this strange understanding that suicide is very complex, and it would appear that the numbers of so-called spontaneous suicides are increasing. So that's a term used where there is no obvious psychological distress in the background, and there is no clear evidence as to why these numbers of spontaneous suicides are increasing. So here we are, we're catapulted into this world, we're in it, we can't turn the clock back, and so we're doing our best to reach others who are either in suicidal distress, or families, practices, communities, schools, colleges, universities where there has been a suicide, to work alongside them. And one of the things that I discovered through my own suicidal crisis 8 months after Cameron died, was that we need a safe space and we need purpose in life. And if those two things come together, then suicide can be prevented. And so we started the Canmore Trust, this charity which has reach across the whole of the United Kingdom, and it's growing at a phenomenal rate. And we work specifically in those two areas. So we seek to find safe spaces for those impacted by suicide, and we seek to work with people to find purpose, either to rebuild lives where there has been a suicide, or where there is the hopelessness of suicidal ideation, to work with individuals to find purpose and a way forward. We've been going for just over 18 months, and we're growing at a phenomenal rate. By the time this goes out, we will have trained another 16 individuals to take part in all that we do as a charity, so impacting those where suicide has been an issue for them. And we continue to grow, and of course Practice Plan has been a part of that, not just supporting us emotionally, but also financially as well. And we're hugely grateful to Practice Plan and to the staff for all their involvement and support, because as you will well know, dentistry, medicine, vet medicine are sadly professions that contribute to larger numbers of suicide. So we know that vet medicine and dentistry probably sit around 4 times the national average for suicide, and medicine has probably just edged ahead of that following COVID and all that COVID has brought, possibly now as high as 5 times the national average in certain sectors of the medical profession. So it's good to talk, it's good to have these conversations and to challenge us in our mental well-being and mental fitness, but particularly around the issue of suicide and suicidal ideation.
Yes, as you said, it's always been an important topic, and it just seems to be growing and growing in importance at the moment. And some of those statistics that you've just given us, John, are quite shocking, really. And I was involved in a conversation only this morning with someone who asked what I was going to be doing today, and I mentioned that we would be recording this podcast. That prompted a conversation where she revealed she tried to take her own life in the past. And I don't think we realise just how much of an issue there is bubbling under the surface for an awful lot of people. And I think the work that you're doing is absolutely fantastic. And I would implore anyone listening to this to go on your website and look at things like the resources. You specifically mentioned gambling there, and I know that there's a section in the resources part of the website that focuses on gambling, but I think the work that you're doing is amazing, and I'm not surprised that it's growing so rapidly, because I think people are really starting to become aware of the importance of the topic, and as you said, the importance of talking about this, not hiding it or ignoring it or denying it, but talking about it. And part of that is the raising awareness. And I was going to ask about how a year ago you were embarking on this marathon walk from Land's End to John O'Groats. How did that all go?
Well, it was the best thing I ever did, because it helped me in my mental fitness, and I'm just going to stop there for a moment, because I'm using the term mental fitness instead of mental well-being, and I just want to bring that challenge to our discussion today. Because mental well-being has become a kind of passive entity. It's something that you kind of try to osmose, whereas mental fitness, as in physical fitness, is something that you have to work towards. And so I think it's much more helpful to talk about the concept of mental fitness rather than mental well-being. And we can come back and talk about that if you would like to. But part of my mental fitness as well as physical fitness was finding the great outdoors again. I'd always been someone who climbed mountains and walked and cycled. But after Cameron died, as a family, life is so difficult. Trying to find anything to go forward with is so difficult. And then I started walking again, and I found myself putting a backpack on and walking for 15, 20, 25 miles a day. And suddenly the idea struck me that I might want to walk from Land's End to John O'Groats, 1,200 odd miles. something I guess I'd always thought I might want to do at some point, maybe when I retired. But here it was, appearing out the mist again as something to do. And so we set off last summer, and so Isabel, my wife, and I, and another close couple, John and Lorraine, and then others joined us to be part of the core team and travel with us. But we then encountered literally thousands of individuals who came to walk with us during the course of those 77 days. And something remarkable happened in front of us, because the whole idea was about opening up the discussion on suicide. But I hadn't quite appreciated how isolating suicides can be in families, communities, and practices. And so we suddenly saw people coming out of this place of darkness to walk with us and talk together. And we were in the Derbyshire Pennines. I think the most pivotal day for me realizing what was happening, I was sitting having lunch, and there were 3 families also having lunch in front of me or around us. And I realized that these families had all lost a son to suicide, average time maybe 3.5 to 4 years out from the suicide event. But what was pivotal was that none of these families had ever met another family affected by suicide. And that was just such a pivotal realization that suicide is so isolating. Often people run from other members of their family, they run from their communities, they run from their church groups, they run from religious organizations because of the guilt and the shame that seems to be inherently part of the suicide grieving process. And I heard these families sharing their experience and sharing mobile telephone numbers, talking about possibly going on holiday together. And I wept as I ate my sandwiches that day, realizing just how important was this work that was opening up in front of us. And of course, it's continued because we now have the 3 dads walking for the charity Papyrus. And they've done a remarkable job encouraging the Secretary of State for Education in England to have suicide safety planning in school curricula. And then we had Lens Light, so Andy and Linda Eden travelling in a tractor from John O'Groats to Land's End, but also taking in Westminster Parliament to talk about the increased risk of suicide and mental health issues within the rural communities. And they did a remarkable job on behalf of their son, Len, who died by suicide on the 1st of January 2022. And so there are remarkable events now happening. And I would just encourage people, if you come across such events, please go and make yourself part of it. Go and be involved, because you'll never regret that. And you might just learn something about conversations around saving lives, about opening up conversations in this world of increased risk of suicide.
And I was struck when looking at the Canmore Trust website about this distinction, or link between postvention and prevention. The point you were making about the families that felt quite isolated, and you were overhearing them get together. But the more we talk about it, yes, it must help them directly, but then also that must lead to prevention.
Yeah, and just in case people who are watching in haven't quite understood this concept of postvention, postvention is an intervention where there has already been a suicide. And what's very clear in the literature is that today's postvention is tomorrow's prevention. And the statistics would suggest that if you lose a first-degree relative, a family member, then you carry a 15% lifetime increased risk of dying by suicide. And so talking openly about that, also for relationships and marriages, if you lose a child to suicide, there is a 2/3 chance that your marriage will end by 2 years following the suicide event. And that's because suicide opens up unbelievable chasms and cracks in the lives of individuals. And I certainly found myself in a place after Cameron died where I hardly had the emotional energy to look after myself, never mind trying to look after my wife and my other kids. And so you fall into this strange chasm of brokenness and emotional dysregulation, which needs input to pull you back out and say, we can do this, we can get together.
And so with that sort of theme of how isolated people can feel and how depleted of energy, as you were just describing, what sort of things, what sort of advice do you think you could give on a day like today? What sort of things should we be all thinking about when it comes to suicide prevention?
Well, I think the most important thing is identifying that opening up conversations and asking a difficult question like, are you thinking of taking your life? Are you thinking of dying by suicide? Is a pivotal moment in someone's life, and it will never precipitate a suicide and may well pull someone back from suicide. The other thing is about signposting. People talk about signposting all the time, signposting to the organizations that are working in suicide prevention and postvention. But it isn't good enough just to signpost and say, there's the organization you should engage with. You actually have to physically take the person to that place of engagement and that place of safety. And it's a complaint I hear all the time in the suicide community that GPs, healthcare workers, even psychiatrists and community psychiatric nurses signpost and say, there it is. But people choose not to. It's too difficult. It's too tough for them. So going with someone, dropping what you're doing that day and going with someone to a place of safety, a place of engagement, is absolutely life-saving as well.
I mean, that sounds like we have a responsibility to be more proactive when we have some concerns and some fears over the safety of someone, rather than waiting for them to come to us to seek it. And I think that makes so much sense. In terms of, I will return to the point that you were referring to earlier on, the mental fitness point, because I can see the relevance of that in terms of your comparison with physical fitness, something that you have to work at. When someone's mental fitness is maybe starting to struggle, are there things that you think people should be looking out for in friends, relatives, that might act as a clue?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and families tend to know their relatives well. And the tragedy that I hear all the time is that relatives will say, but he was so much better just 48 hours prior to him taking his life. And it's a very common feature that people seem to be so much better. They'll go to their GP and say, I'm stopping taking the antidepressants. It's amazing. I'm feeling so much better. Or they use a credit card and they start buying things. They enter this phase of seeming normality again. And the family goes, whoa, that's amazing. We're in a good place. And that's simply the prelude to the event of suicide. And so we need to look out for that. We need to look out for significant mood changes, behavioral changes, but often a preoccupation with death or dying as well will often come up in conversation, or planning for death, or making contact with friends or family that they haven't been in contact with for a long, long time, as if they're subliminally saying cheerio to people, saying bye-bye to people. So those significant mood changes can be a herald for suicidal planning and suicidal activity. So really important to say, just wait a minute, what's going on here? Can you help me to understand why these changes have taken place? You say that you're feeling better, but are you really feeling better? I wonder if, given what you've come through, whether you might be thinking about suicide. Could we open that up and have that discussion? And really importantly, it's important in that question never to judge. So sometimes people will say, you're not thinking of doing something silly, are you? And immediately there's judgment in the room, which will invoke a non-response from the person that you're questioning, because it may seem silly to you as a questioner, but it is genuinely a matter of life and death for the individual that you're questioning. And so not bringing judgment into the room is so important as you open up that question and that dialogue.
I think that's such a powerful point that you've just made, John, because I think that you were speaking earlier on about the Canmore Trust and the focus on creating safe spaces. Well, part of that safe space is a safe environment where people feel able to open up without being judged. And I think it is beholden on us all to think carefully about the language. I don't think we do that enough in just day to day, let alone in sensitive situations, about how it could be interpreted and perceived. So I think that's absolutely right, that we shouldn't duck the issue, but we should handle it sensitively and carefully, if we want to create that safe space where people feel that they can open up.
Mm.
You mentioned that at the start of the conversation about the dentistry and how that's 4 times the national average. I mean, that's obviously the group of professionals that we focus on particularly. And I guess I'm seeing an awful lot of pressure building for a lot in the profession at the moment. So that's, I suppose, what I was thinking when I was talking about the fact that now more than ever, I think we've got to be prepared to have these kind of conversations. I know for a fact that some of my team are talking to some of your professional colleagues, and they are talking about taking their life because that pressures of whether it's NHS activity, whether it's fear of GDC, whether it's just running a business. There's so many things specific to dentistry, in addition to all the other things that I do feel we need to pay particular attention to the profession.
Completely. And just this morning, the Canmore Trust is dealing with another suicide in dentistry. It's horrific, and we need to do better. We really need to do better. From the regulator all the way down to health boards and trusts dealing with healthcare employees. This is a tough gig, and we really need to do better in the way that we handle our healthcare workers. We really, really need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think on that note, John, we'll bring the conversation to a close, unless there's any sort of parting comments that you would like to make on this special day.
Yeah, the comment I guess I'd like to make is that I think I'm finding more and more, although suicide is about a multiplicity of things, impacting factors, that microaggression is becoming an increasing issue for healthcare workers at the coalface. And we've gone in a very short period of time during COVID from healthcare workers being applauded on Thursday evenings through to a time when it would appear that we've got some of the highest levels of complaint against healthcare professionals that we've ever had. And in addition to that, not only is the fear of reporting either local complaints or to the regulator, there's this issue of microaggression from patients, and I am hearing this more and more and more, and I do think that we need a government initiative to re-educate our nation about being respectful for not just for healthcare, dentists, doctors, nurses, but for administrative staff, for physiotherapists, for a whole host of people. And beyond that as well, shop workers, factory workers, bus drivers, train drivers who get abuse as well. We need to move away from this multiple microaggression that is so prevalent in so many of our encounters as human beings, and I guess move towards a place of greater kindness for each other. And so this is National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Day. And we've talked about how we might prevent suicide, but I wonder how we might generally prevent suicide by making the world, making our environment a kinder place. And so here's my challenge, that you go away from this discussion today and you go out of your way to be kind to someone. A gratuitous event that you go and you're in a cafe, you're having a bacon roll and a sandwich, and you pay for someone else's next door to you without them knowing about it. Do something that just would add to the communality of kindness in our planet. And who knows, we might just see a difference in well-being across the whole sphere.
I think that's a fabulous note on which to end the discussion. Thank you so much, John, for your time today and your openness and your insights. It's such an important topic, and with people like you raising awareness, being prepared to talk about it in the way that you have done over the last 20 minutes or so, hopefully we'll make some significant progress. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to be part of it. And once again, my thanks to you and to your team for your support to the Canmore Trust. Please take a look at the website, folks, and be part of this movement. So grateful.
Thank you very much.